Welcome back to another episode of the Healing Chronic Illness Summit. And today's guest is Kelsey from beautiful Hawaii. And she's went through so many symptoms and conditions that she usually says she's been her own best case study. So welcome, Kelsey. And we're great to have you here on the show.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here and to be connecting with everyone.
Yes, absolutely. It's so great to have someone who went through so much to inspire people and show them that healing is definitely possible no matter where you come from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it was about only the easy cases got better, I wouldn't have gotten better because I was one of those that many different doctors, naturopaths, homeopaths were stumped by. They couldn't figure out what to do to get me better. And I tried so many things.
So can you tell us a little bit more how you got started, what you did before, if you already switched your diets before? How was it for you? How did you find Medical Medium?
Yeah, so for me, I had a really long journey to finding medical medium. I was a science girl, a big skeptic. You know, my bachelor's is in biology, my master's is in nutrition and functional medicine. So, you know, and I think everybody kind of comes into medical medium skeptical, right? You know, wondering, who is this guy? How could he know this stuff, right? Is it really going to work for me? I've tried so many other things and they haven't worked. So those were all things that were going through my head as well. So to go way back, I was sick since I was a baby. I had chronic constipation. I had lots of issues, just none were big enough to go, oh, there's something really wrong with her, until I was in high school. So in high school, that's when I started to get really sick. So every time I would eat a meal, I would get Raynaud's. My body temperature would actually drop to a hypothermic state where I would be shaking and shivering. I had the nurse take my temperature. It was hypothermic. I had to shower after every meal just to get my body temperature back up. So that's when I knew something was really off, right? And then I started having really painful periods and really heavy periods, which I knew wasn't right, because when I started having periods at 13, that was not my experience. I had no problem with periods. So that's where things kind of started building up. And then by the time I was 20, you know, I was diagnosed with celiac disease, IBS. My chronic UTIs had turned into interstitial cystitis. I had endometriosis. There was just so many different labels piling up for me. And in my early 20s then, it seemed like almost every time I would go to the doctor, I would get a new label, right?
Oh my gosh.
And I knew, you know, like Hashimoto's and anxiety disorder and all of these things. And I saw this trajectory and I went, ooh, this is not good. I'm 20. Where am I going to be at 30? Right. And so, of course, I did what anybody would do. I trusted my doctors to help me get better. And unfortunately, they just didn't have the tools. They said, hey, we can help you manage this, but there's no way for us to get you better. And intuitively, I just thought, that doesn't make sense. I know how the body works. There's always a reason for why something's broken. And we just have to figure out what's broken and fix it. Right. So, you know, I went to the best of the best on, you know, the West Coast, the East Coast, for conventional medicine. And when they weren't able to give me answers, I shifted to functional medicine. And I got some help, you know, along the way from everybody, but nobody was able to say, okay, here's the root cause, and then to get my symptoms to get better. So I went from conventional to functional medicine. From functional medicine, I went to naturopathic medicine, homeopathy, energy medicine. I tried just about everything. I went paleo, and then I went autoimmune paleo, the AIP diet. I went low FODMAPs. I did Gerson. I did so many different things, and I didn't do them for like a month, right? Like there's the people who try something for a month and they're like, oh, this isn't working. I would do something for about a year. And if there was no improvements at all in a year, I'd go back to my doctor or whatever practitioner I was working with at the time, and I'd say, hey, like, let's look at my labs, let's look at what's happening in my body. And we would just see that things were still getting worse, right? Like I was in the pre-diabetic category, moving more and more quickly into a diabetic category, even though they had me on a low sugar, you know, hardly any fruit in my diet. I was getting worse and worse. So it was at that point, when I had been through so many different practitioners and tried so many different protocols that to me seemed like, the best of the best as far as science is concerned, that that I finally decided to open the book Medical Medium. I had known about the book, was not open to reading it because I thought that science would have all my answers. And so I pursued that, for about, I think, 7 or 8 years, just, okay, what does the best of the best science say? Implementing that, even doing, I was gluten-free, dairy-free since I was 20, but that wasn't enough. I tried vegan. That wasn't enough. I tried, paleo. That wasn't enough. So I knew there was something missing. And when I read the Medical Medium book, I just had to set my ego aside a little bit, right? Like that sciencey, like science has all the answers. I was like, okay, let me just set that aside and read this book with an open mind. And as I read the book, I had aha moment after aha moment where the things he was describing, these like big concepts, were things that I had figured out, that my body had told me this is what's going on for sure, over a 10-year period. And as I'm reading his book, I'm going, oh, I wish I read this book sooner, because it would have saved me so much time, and so much, throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to figure out what was going wrong. So I read the Medical Medium book, and immediately I just knew, because there were so many pieces that I had already validated for myself, through the painful trial and error process that so many people go through, that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this for 1 month. I'll try it for 1 month, and see how I feel, right? And that 1 month ended up turning into how I've been living my life for years now.
Wow. So when did you get started?
You know how when you've been through so much, you forget the timeline a little bit? I think it was in 2016. 2016 wow. Or 2017. Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah. So it's been quite a few years now.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
how long did it take you to see some improvements on this?
Yeah. So if I had been looking for specific things to get better in the first month, I probably wouldn't have kept doing it. But because by the time I got to the Medical Medium information, I had learned that it's really important to look at your body as a whole system, and to know that you might not see results in the areas you're looking at, but you want to look for results somewhere in the body that show you're moving in the positive, in the right direction, right? So after just a month of just, bringing in the heavy metal detox smoothie and avoiding all the no foods, the chronic yeast infections that I had had for about 15 years continuously. The only time my yeast infections were not present is when I was on a strong antifungal. As soon as I was off of them, the yeast infections were back. So this was a never got better issue. And after a month on the Medical Medium, applying the Medical Medium information, the yeast infections went away. And I was like, whoa, that's impossible, right? I'm eating more fruit. That was supposed to be the problem in the first place, right? It was fruit and sugar. But my yeast infections are going away, and your body doesn't lie, right? So if the yeast infection goes away, it's because something is more balanced in the body, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, there's something to this. I'm going to continue, because I have every single thing I have tried prior has never gotten me any improvement with my chronic yeast infections, with the exception of only when I'm on an antifungal, which to me, that's not an improvement. If you go off of it, it comes right back within a day. So yeah, so that was my first indicator that what I was doing was working. I still had a ton of skepticism, just because I had been through so much, right? Like I had been to so many practitioners who said, oh, we can fix this. Oh, we've got this. And then 6 months or a year later, they'd say, oh, this usually works for everybody else. You just must be really, a tough case. Sorry, didn't work for you. So I'd been through that so many times, that trauma of putting my trust into someone else, and then feeling really, really disappointed. Disappointed doesn't even really get the word, right? Like when your quality of life is gone and you are bedbound and you can't work, you can't read a book, you can't, you can't even think clearly anymore, you have so much hope attached to getting better that when someone says this can help you, you get so excited. And then when it doesn't help, it's devastating. And I've been through that so many times that when I found the medical medium information, I kind of built up walls, right? Don't get too excited. Don't get hopeful. Nothing else has worked so far. And now this seems like really out there, right? Um, but I decided to continue with it and look for other signs from my body that said whether it was helping or not. And there were just more and more signs as I kept going that said, yeah, this is helping. This is helping me to get better. A second really big one was that for about 5 years, when we were checking my hemoglobin A1C, my fasting glucose, my fasting insulin, when we were looking at the markers for my blood sugar regulation, they were getting worse and worse and worse. And I was right about at the diabetic category. So I was pre-diabetic, but right at the, almost to the point where I could be labeled a diabetic, which is really scary, right? To be, I think, I was 23 at the time. And what was so confusing to my naturopath at the time, she was a functional medicine naturopath, was that I was doing everything right for blood sugar control. I was only eating the low glycemic fruits, I was only having berries in small amounts. I was following essentially, a paleo keto diet, no sugar in my diet, and I did not cheat ever. Yet here I was going worse and worse and worse towards being a diabetic, right? And when I applied the medical medium information, one of the things I had the most fear about was fruit, because I knew I was in this pre-diabetic category and I was terrified to become a diabetic, right? And that's the path I was on. And the fruit fear was so strong. So actually, before I even started my first month of medical medium, I went in and had all my labs done, including my sugar regulation levels, because I wanted to monitor that to make sure that I was okay, that I wasn't, hurting myself by doing all this fruit. And lo and behold, after I think it was about 3 or 4 months in, my numbers started to get better. And by 6 months in, I was completely out of the pre-diabetic category, did not have signs of insulin resistance. And right, I had been working on this with my doctors for 5 years, and it was getting worse and worse. 6 months into medical medium, and my numbers are normal for the first time in my, adult life. So that was another huge sign that my body was saying, what you're doing is helping. What you're doing is on the right track. And that helped me to build more and more trust in the medical medium information because of the results I saw. It wasn't blind trust, right? There was healthy skepticism and noticing the facts that my body was giving me about, yeah, this is lining up, this is working.
So did you also start cutting out the fats right away, or did you still add in more fats during the beginning?
Yeah, so one thing that was so mind-blowing to me, if you would have asked me before I found the medical medium information, if you would have said, are you on a low-fat diet or a high-fat diet? I would have been like, oh, low-fat diet, for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you actually look at fat intake, it's amazing, in the position we are in first world countries where we have so much available to us, it's so easy to eat a ton of fat. And so when I found the medical medium information, I didn't focus on lowering my fats right away, only because I wasn't aware how high my fat intake was. But I did cut out meat within the first couple of months. I did a slow transition into that because that was a really hard thing for me to give up meat. That was something I was was just part of my life, I grew up on a bison ranch, so we always were eating meat, like 2 to 3 times a day we eat meat.
Wow.
So what I did is I slowly transitioned off of meat, which meant I was slowly reducing my fat intake over a couple of months. And then once I got, the meat out of my diet, that was, a huge relief on my liver fat wise. But then I still needed to look at my fat intake from nuts and seeds and avocado and oils, because I was using so much oil in my cooking, because fats taste good, right? Not gonna lie, they taste really good. So that was something that I brought down slowly over time, and I definitely saw a jump in my improvements, the pacing of my improvements once I brought the fat down.
Right, yeah, that's how I realized it too. I mean, I always thought that I would be eating a low fat and eating or drinking the low fat milk or plant-based milk that is low fat, but in the end, the label never really tells you how much fat there is really in it.
Yeah. And the thing is, your body never lies, right? So, one thing that I've always been able to use to help me to understand how much my body can handle is I look for the feedback from my body. And this is something that I teach my clients and I teach in my online course, is how to listen to your body's feedback to guide you, because it's the most specific way to get insights, right? Because it's specific to you and your body never lies. You never experience diarrhea and it's not the truth, right? Like, if you experience diarrhea, it's real. Um, so for me, one thing I would look at with my fat intake to decide, okay, is this a fat intake appropriate for me? Is, how's my weight? Am I retaining fluid? Which is a sign of lymphatic congestion from a backed up liver, right? Do I have puffiness in my face? Do I have swelling in my fingers and in my my legs? I looked for those indicators that said my body was a little bit overwhelmed, and if my body was a little bit overwhelmed, then I knew I wanted to back off a little bit more on my fats to make processing easier on my liver.
So did you also bring in, as you mentioned, the lymphatic system, some other things like dry brushing and getting on a trampoline to move the lymph fluids?
Yeah, so for me, I wish it was like cookie cutter, right? Like, first I did this, then I did this, and then, it culminated into this, and then I got better, right? But really, what I found, yes, I did use a lot of different tools throughout my healing journey. But what I found, and what I found with, the hundreds of clients that I've worked with, is that nobody's journey just goes straight, right? So there were times where my body was showing signs that I needed more lymphatic support. Okay, so I did things to help my lymphatic system. Then there's times where that would feel really good, but maybe I needed more detoxification support. So I would bring in those supports. Okay, then there was times where that would back up and I needed more antiviral support. So I would go in that direction. So it was really much more of a dance than it was a linear process where I just added new tools.
So you already had a really good intuition and knowledge about what to apply exactly to your current situation, like the virus stuff and backup of the lymphatic system.
Yeah, so that's my thing. That's what I'm really good at, because that's what I needed to get good at to get better. So the only reason I'm good at it is because my body, my body set the challenge level really high, right? So the whole reason that I went back to graduate school and studied human nutrition and functional medicine for chronic illness was because I was sick. So from my bed, I was going through, textbooks and reading medical textbooks and learning about all the mechanisms in the body, like down to the cellular level, because I didn't understand why my body was doing the things it was doing. So anytime my body would do something, right, like my face would swell up, or my hand would curl because of the joint swelling. I had rheumatoid arthritis. Whenever something like that would happen, I would study it to the smallest degree that I could to understand, okay, what could actually cause this, root cause wise, right? So I studied that, and then when I got the medical medium information and got more insights into the actual root causes, then what I could do and what I continue to do is reverse engineer, right? So if I feel something in my body, I go, okay, what mechanism in the body could make this happen, and what root cause would make that mechanism do that, right? So for instance, with celiac disease, so I had celiac disease. I was extremely sensitive to gluten. Even the tiniest bit of cross contamination that I wouldn't know about my body would have a very severe reaction. And we could always trace it back to the cross-contamination. Oh, sorry, I used this spatula to turn the buns, the gluten buns, and then I picked up your bun with that. And I would have a severe reaction from that level of cross-contamination. So with the celiac disease, having that level of reaction, what I learned from the medical medium information was that it was related to the amount of pathogens in my gastrointestinal tract that were feeding off of the gluten, right? And so by understanding, okay, I'm feeling this, what mechanism could cause this? Well, you get that intestinal swelling, which can either cause diarrhea or it can cause constipation, depending on how it inflames the intestines. But what creates that inflammation? So that's where you have to get down to root cause, right? The mechanism is inflammation in the intestines, but what could cause it? Either a physical injury, like a cut, right, from surgery. Well, that wasn't the case. Or a pathogen can injure the tissue when it's proliferating. And so that's how I would reverse engineer it. And okay, all right, so if I'm having celiac and I'm having these intestinal inflammation issues, then I know that I have a pathogen issue. And then from the medical medium information, I know that it's a pathogen issue, most likely with Streptococcus bacteria, a mutation of that. And so I want to focus on, the herbs and the supplements and the foods that are going to really help to take down that Streptococcus bacteria issue. And when I did that, when I followed that mechanistic approach down to the root cause and I addressed the root cause, guess what? I did not have severe gluten reactions after a couple of years. And
That's
I still
incredible.
don't. Like I think it was about 6 years, I could not eat in a restaurant. So for 6 years, I didn't eat in a restaurant because I couldn't. If they messed up one little thing, I would be on the floor sick. And so, within a couple of minutes. So I just couldn't do that. And now I can go out to restaurants all the time and I don't have that problem. Cross-contamination it's not like I go out and eat gluten, right? Like I still don't do that. But I have accidentally ingested gluten and I did not have that severe reaction. Now that's not to say that I should eat gluten, that it's good for me or anything like that. But there's clear feedback from my body that things have changed in a way that my body is able to keep a balanced state better.
Yeah, and that your liver is better able to detoxify things that the viruses produce and to get rid of toxins.
Yeah, exactly.
So did you also realize an emotional change when you got started on the medical medium protocol, so to say, protocol?
Yeah, totally. Okay. So like I said, I'm science girl, right? So when I got really sick, I was like, okay, guys, let's just figure out how to fix these symptoms and get me back to normal life, right? No interest in looking deeply in myself emotionally or spiritually. I just wanted to get fixed and get back to normal life. And, there's something to be said about what happens to you when you're bedbound and you're not able to work or go out with friends. You really have to sit with yourself and the fears and the insecurities. You can't really distract yourself, right? By going out and doing work and going out and doing things with friends. You're sitting with them all day, every day, for weeks, for months. And so for me, when I got really sick, I had to face a lot of fears about, am I worthy of love? If I'm not contributing in the world, do I even matter? Right? Am I just a burden? And those were the kinds of things that I did not want to sit with at the time. But as I went through my journey, and especially once I found the medical medium information, I started to dig into those a little bit more and a little bit more. And as much as I want to say that, so changing my symptoms, improving and resolving my symptoms totally gave me my life back, my physical life back. But the emotional and spiritual growth that I've had through the whole chronic illness process and through reading the medical medium books, which are so focused on compassion, who I am as a human being, how I show up in my relationships, both with myself and with other people, I am such a more peaceful, content, happy, non-judgmental, loving person. It's kind of night and day from, from who I was before. And I would have said, if you would have asked people, I would have, they would say, she's a nice person. She's a good person. She's a hard worker. But how I felt on the inside was so different from how I feel now.
Yes, I get the same experience too. When I was in my teenage times and everything, after that, before I changed my diet, I was inside very angry and aggressive sometimes and nervous. And as soon as I changed my diet, I got a little bit more peaceful and calm on the inside.
Yeah. And there's something to say about when you learn how to tune into your body and actually take care of your body's needs, right? That cultivates that compassion for your body, compassion for yourself. I think for most of us, it's pretty easy to be kind to someone else that we love, right? But to share that same level of kindness and compassion with ourselves and say, I can't go out tonight because my body is tired. I need to have an adrenal snack every 2 hours because that's what my body thrives on. Those types of decisions are really, acts of self-love, right?
Right. So you mentioned the adrenal snacks, and I know from you that you always encourage people to eat their adrenal snacks because they're so important. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Here's the thing. I wouldn't point them out unless I saw so consistently that they are game changers for so many people, and they are. So keeping your blood sugar regulation really stable, which is an issue for most people, even if, it's not to the extent to where it's showing up on a test yet. Blood sugar, regulation is an issue for many, many, many people. And when you have blood sugar regulation issues, you're going to have adrenal stress. And when you have adrenal stress, you're probably going to have some liver stress. And when you have adrenal stress and liver stress, and you have a viral issue going on in your body, it's probably going to lead to a worsening of your symptoms, a worsening of how you feel. You're going to be fluctuating, between feeling good and feeling hangry and feeling, just imbalanced. So what the adrenal snacks do is they give you a perfect combination of three things that your adrenals really need, but also for your blood sugar. So they give you healthy glucose, they give you mineral salts, and they give you potassium. So that perfect combination, which is found in different food combos like, celery sticks, some apple slices, and a few dates, like that's a perfect combo, gives your adrenals what they need to be nice and calm and grounded and take care of you. It gives you support for your blood sugar regulation. It gives you support so that your liver isn't overwhelmed and so that you're not in a susceptible place for viral issues to cause more havoc in your body. So what I've seen is this is absolutely crucial for anybody dealing with chronic illness, with blood sugar regulation issues, with really high stress in their life. There's just, the list goes on and on of people who, when they implement snacking, especially adrenal snacks, but just for sure snacking, every 1 to 2 hours, it makes such a difference. I can even give you an example of a client of mine who ended up putting a blood sugar regulation monitor on her arm for 2 weeks. And so what happened is she, was in her arm and she would just swipe her phone under it and it would give her her blood sugar reading. And so she was tracking it, 24/7 for 2 weeks. And the first week, I had told her about adrenal snacking, but she wasn't quite like on it yet. And she didn't think, she's like, I can't make that big of a deal. So we looked at her blood sugar regulation from the first week and compared it to the second week. So the first week, she wasn't really doing her snacking consistently. Second week, she was. So in the first week, the line was like this. Her blood sugar was up, down, I just like tanking, sky high, tanking, sky high. And she was like, oh, I really need to look at the adrenal snacks, right? So in week 2, she got really good about snacking every hour. And her blood sugar regulation was like this. And when we looked at the prior week, and that it was like, we were looking at a mountain range, and then we were looking at little hills. It was just night and day difference, which really speaks to why the snacking is so important, because it helps you to stay regulated. You don't want to have these highs and these lows that are stressing out your body. It doesn't help you to, have that additional stress that's unnecessary. All you can, if you eat a snack and you don't have that additional stress, that's going to help your body focus on doing other more important tasks.
Yes, especially with the high stress world and fast paced world right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say, just from my own experience, whenever there's a really high stress event going on, I up my snacking even more. And it doesn't mean that I'm eating a ton more food. I'm just eating more frequently. So, when there's a lot of stress going on in the world, I'll be snacking on, a bite of an apple every 30 minutes. I don't eat a whole bunch, but I just make sure to do it even more frequently to make sure that my adrenals are getting what they need in a time when they're under more stress.
So you say that even if we don't do it absolutely 100%, like we eat the apple, date, and the celery, but rather we just eat an apple, that's also already helpful for the adrenals?
Exactly. So I'm never one to be like, oh, you have to do it perfectly, right? Life happens, right? Life happens. Yeah. And so yes, optimally, you're doing an adrenal snack, which has a combination of healthy glucose, mineral salts, and potassium together. That's great. That's ideal. But if there's a time where you're in a pinch, or that's not working for you for some reason, definitely pat yourself on the back if you can just take a bite of an apple, or you can sip on some coconut water. That's beautiful. That's also really helpful.
Yes, and it makes such a big change. I realized it myself because I always totally underestimated the adrenal snacks. And as soon as I started, my hair loss got better and just overall energy got better.
Yeah. And you know what? That's something that I hear every single day from clients when they finally decide to make that shift. They're like, what's crazy? Those adrenal snacks are really helping. You gotta commit to that. And I know that that's a big change for a lot of people, to go from eating 1 or 2, maybe 3 times a day to snacking all the time. I know that's a big change. I had done intermittent fasting for about 2 years because, my doctors were trying to help get my blood sugar regulated. And so I was used to eating 1 to 2 times a day. And then going to snacking was a big, big change for me. But it was a change that helped me get my life back.
Yes, I was just kind of the same. I always thought, well, I don't have an adrenal issue, so I'm feeling much better eating every 3 hours and then wait until the food has been digested and then I eat the next meal. Mm-hmm. But over the course of the year, I realized that eating the adrenal snacks makes a real big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you're not hungry, you can take a bite of something, right? Yeah. Just that blood sugar control.
Absolutely. And people love to snack anyway.
Yeah. Look at kids. Look at toddlers, right? They're eating all the time. Why? Because they eat light, right? And so they're snacking, they're grazing all day, the way a natural body is supposed to eat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how about supplements? Are they important to bring in right away, or would you say that they need to be handled with care and we first gotta see how people react to the dietary change before bringing in supplements?
Yeah, that's a great question. So of course, to start out by saying work with your practitioner, because there's not one cookie cutter supplement or supplement dosage or combination of supplements that's appropriate for everybody. So you and your practitioner together are going to be able to figure that out for yourself better than, I would not go by what you hear as like a mass, everybody should do this or everybody should do that. That's a red flag for me right away, because what's your weight? What's your body size? What are your root causes? Those are things that you want to think about when you're deciding supplements. So there's some people that I work with that are totally fine bringing in supplements right away. And there's others who really need to focus on the foods first and slowly bring in supplements. There's people whose bodies are really, really sensitive because they've got so much that's been going on for so long, so much that's accumulated that big changes are overwhelming to their bodies. So they need to start with really small changes. So I think the most important thing with supplements, yes, I use supplements throughout my healing journey. They always changed. They were always changing because my body was always changing. So the way that I approach supplements for myself is I do it by that reverse engineering, right? And going back to the root cause and then asking myself, okay, because these root causes are really at play for me, they're really the priorities for me, what supplements are going to support me in resolving those root causes? And the other question that I take into account too is understanding what I'm already doing with food, with drinks, all of that. What am I not able to get or not able to get in significant enough amounts from my diet? That's what I would use supplements for, right? So food is first. Food is most important. Get everything you can from food. And then whatever's lacking or whatever you can't get enough of from food sources, that's what I look at with supplements. And for me, my supplement protocol, oh my gosh, I could show you, I have sheets, where I would write down my supplements, write down why I'm taking them and the amounts. And usually about every week to 2 weeks, I would reevaluate based on the feedback I was getting from my body. And based on that feedback, I would adjust. And that didn't mean that it was like a 180 every week, right? There would be small changes. But when I look back 2-3 years, I'm focused on way different things today than I was 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I was on thyroid medication and had major thyroid issues. And so there was a lot of thyroid supports and Epstein-Barr virus supports in my protocol back then that are different from my needs now. So my supplements are different now. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
But there are also the supplements that are kind of necessary because almost everybody is deficient in like the B12 and the zinc. So, but I know that a lot of people are also sensitive to B12. So it's always trial and error. You gotta look how you react to the supplement, and then you can decide whether you stay on it or you wait for a couple of weeks or days before you start bringing them in.
Exactly. And that's why I said at the beginning, like, work with your practitioner, because even though there are fundamental supplements that most people need, you still have to look at how much can your body handle. When is it appropriate to bring in this thing that you need? You've been deficient in it in a really long time. There's a lot of systems in your body that are not working optimally, and so your body might have a hard time processing this B12, even though it's really important for you and you need it. So you have to, it's really, it's a bit nuanced. It's not just as black and white as I wish it was. But some of the most important fundamentals are going to be liquid zinc sulfate, liquid B12 from adenosylcobalamin and methylcobalamin, and EPA, DHA, so omega fatty acids, omega-3s, that are coming from a non-fish source, so coming from a plant-based source. Spirulina, which is like a multi-mineral. It's got so many great minerals in it. Those are some of the fundamentals that are really helpful for most people. But again, you have to work with your practitioner, because just because it's good for you might not mean that you can handle a whole lot of it at first, or that you can go straight into all of them.
Absolutely. So I think, another question. Did you ever had a point in your healing journey where you said, well, I need some more motivation to keep this all going? Or were your healing signs motivation enough to keep it going?
Yeah. I mean, of course, there are times where, I would go visit family and they would be eating like a big pizza, right? And it smelled so good and it looked so good. And I know it tastes good. I know it's not healthy, but I knew it would taste good. And I didn't eat the pizza, but I was a little bit sad. I'm going to be honest, I was a little bit sad. And what I would end up doing usually when that would happen is the next day I would go out and get all the ingredients to make my own pizza. Um, that wasn't going to be hurtful to my body. So yes, there were times where it was really hard, but for me, because my quality of life was so low and the amount of pain that I dealt with was so intense, that there was no food that I missed enough to make it worth having those symptoms again. My endometriosis was so bad that I literally, would start panicking at the thought of my period coming up because the pain was so excruciating. I remember we were out at a restaurant once, and I was still in high school at this time, and my period started coming on, and I laid on the floor in a restaurant. I couldn't get up. I was in so much pain, and you can imagine how embarrassing that is, right?
Yeah.
Everybody looking at you, and that's the amount of pain I was in. And I remember another time where the period pain had hit. I was in the kitchen with my mom, and I just went down to the floor with the pain, and I just looked up and said, can you just punch me? Can you just knock me out? Because I just don't think I can even bear this amount of pain. It was so bad. So experiencing that level of pain and having that level of pain every month. And that was just my endometriosis. When I had interstitial cystitis, right, that was a whole nother week or a whole nother couple of days of pain that literally makes you feel like, am I going to live? Because it's just such intense pain. Having experienced that level of pain, I never looked at a food and went, that's worth it. That pizza, that donut, I had such a visceral experience of chronic illness that really kept my priorities clear for me. Didn't mean it was always easy, but it helped me keep my priorities clear.
Yes, but I guess some people that don't have that severe pain and experiences are more tending towards well, I'll have that pizza once in a while.
Yeah. And so one thing that I like to look at, and this is just because I've done a lot of emotional work for myself, is if you say that you really want to feel, to get your body healthier, if you say that this is really important to you, but then you're doing an action like, eating some pizza, just use that example, that clearly isn't helpful for your body. I hear this all the time with clients. So when you say this is the most important thing to you, but you're doing a behavior that doesn't line up with what you're saying is most important, it's a really important conversation to have with yourself. And the question that I ask is, and you say this non-judgmentally, it's just with love, right? Just curious why you're doing what you're doing. So I'd say, okay, you're saying that this is the most important thing to you, but then you did this. Why? Why'd you do that? And usually what it comes back to, if you're able to look at it, just not judging yourself, just being curious about yourself, almost like you're a third person looking in on the experience, right? Like, oh, that's so interesting. Why did that happen? It usually comes back to either being afraid of being judged by other people that are around you, right? And being afraid of being judged because at the core, it's important to you to feel loved and accepted, right? So you're fearing that you're going to be rejected if you don't do what everybody else is doing. So that's a common one. And another common one is, I don't really believe that I can get better. So if you don't have that belief that you can get better, you're not going to stick to it because you don't think it's actually going to get you there, right? You're kind of half in and half out. So I always like to look into that dynamic, because it's the root reasoning, the emotion behind it is different for different people. But, getting clear on that is going to help you to stay on track more often, because you're going to understand why you went off track in the first place. It's still the, reverse engineering down to the root cause, except for it's not physical symptoms, it's emotional symptoms.
Right. So one last question that I ask everyone is, if you could start again, would you do things differently, or would you just do everything the same because you learned so much from it?
There's a few things I would do differently. Number one, I would have documented it more. At the time, I thought I was the only one dealing with the symptoms that I had. I felt very alone, and I didn't trust that I would get better. And so there's no documentation of the worst for me. And I wish I had that now, just to show others who are in that dark place, hey, like, look at where I was at, look at where I am now, look at how functioning I am now. Just to help other people, because I know that was just so hard for me. So that's one thing I would have done differently. The second thing I would have done differently, and I laugh even saying this, but I would have spent more time working on the emotional side right up front. Because what I realized throughout my healing journey is that when I went off protocol, when I didn't stick to the things that I knew were important, like my bedtime, my adrenal snacking, when I didn't do things that I knew were helpful for my body, it was because there was an emotional hang up. And so had I just looked at that more thoughtfully early on, it would have helped me make progress faster, because I wouldn't have been kind of self-sabotaging myself in the process.
Absolutely.
I think the third thing, the course that I made, the online course, is all about listening to your body and listening to your body's feedback to guide you. If there was one thing I wish I would have known at the beginning of my journey, it would have been to listen to my body for feedback and use that almost as like breadcrumbs on a trail, right? Detective clues to figure out what I needed to tweak. I learned that process, and that's why I share it with other people now. But when I first started, I didn't trust myself and I didn't trust my body, and I wasn't really connected to my body. I kind of disconnected, and I lived up here quite a bit, right? So tuning into my body and harnessing my body's feedback to be, like a teammate on this project of getting better would have been amazing to have at the beginning.
For sure. And your course sounds really interesting and so helpful to a lot of people, I guess.
Yeah, it's just about empowering people to listen to their bodies, right? Which is something we all should have learned in kindergarten, first, second grade, in primary school, in elementary school. That's what really we should be learning, right? Is how to tune into our bodies and understand when our body is saying, hey, red flag, we need to change something. It would save us from getting to this point of chronic illness and mystery illness, right? But nobody ever teaches that. And so that's what I'm doing, is just filling in that gap for people so that they are empowered to make thoughtful decisions for themselves based on their own specific body's guidance, their body's feedback.
Yes, that's always the best thing to trust in.
Yeah.
Because
like
it never lies.
Lies, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have a headache, your body's not just being dramatic. There's a reason for the headache.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if people want to find you, where can they find you? If they want to read more of your stuff?
So you can go to my Instagram, which is Heal with Kelsey. You can find me on my website, healwithkelsey.com. And from there, you can find free recipes, free resources, as well as my online course. It's all there on my website, or, you can get it from my Instagram as well.
Awesome. Then thank you so much for joining in and sharing all of your, profound knowledge and all of the tips that you have and all of your experiences you already went through that are probably a lot of help to many people out there.
Yeah, no, it's an honor to be here. And like I said, I know that those of you watching, like, you've been through a lot already, and so the reason that I'm here today is not because it's easy or comfortable to talk about all these little, really intimate things that I went through, the pain that I went through, the symptoms I went through. I share them because I know what it's like to feel alone and to feel hopeless. And so sharing my story, I do that because I know that's what you need to hear to even, begin to have trust in your body, to begin to have hope in that you can make progress. So I'm sharing for you because just human to human, we deserve to feel healthy and to feel free to express ourselves. And when we're in chronic illness, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to do that. So I share because I want you to get better, just like I did, because it changed my life, and I know how it would change yours as well.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining in.
Absolutely. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.